I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud, and this is Commotion. Okay, settle in for a moment because we're going to talk about one of the biggest stories in the Canadian film industry at the moment. Let me just give you the background here. Last week, Elle-Máijá Tailfeathers was honored for her performance in the movie called Sweet Angel Baby at the Toronto Film Critics Association Awards. But then Elle-Máijá returned that award. She did that after learning that the acceptance speech that she'd recorded was edited to remove the parts where she expressed support for Palestine. Since then, the TFCA's president took responsibility for that edit and resigned. And then in the last week, almost half of the association's members have also stepped down. Alex Nino-Gittu has been covering the story for the Canadian press. Alex, it's good to see you, pal. How you doing?
It's good to be back on the show. Doing good. How are you?
Good. Listen, this is a complicated story, but maybe the place we should begin is can you start by telling me what we know about why Elle-Máijá decided to return her award?
For sure. So Elle-Máijá, she won Best Supporting Performer, but she couldn't attend the awards herself, so she sent in her acceptance speech via video. She says the speech people heard at the award show wasn't the speech that she recorded, or wasn't the full speech. So in the version that she submitted, she included a brief expression of solidarity with the people of Palestine, saying her heart is with them as they experience an ongoing genocide, and she thanked her peers in the industry who've had the courage to speak up about it. But when the speech was played at the ceremony, that section had been removed, right? So, ultimately, the words she was thanking people for saying were the same kinds of words that were removed from her acceptance speech, right? So it's a little, isn't that ironic, right?
Right. No, I mean, yes. Oh, sorry, keep going. Yes.
Yeah, so she wrote a letter to the TFCA's members explaining, why she's returning the award, saying this is an act of censorship, that she's profoundly disgusted and ashamed, and she basically felt like the award had been tainted.
I think her original speech was a little over 2 minutes, and then they ended up sort of airing about a minute worth of her speech. In her statement, Elle-Máijá wrote that it's much bigger than this one incident. What does she mean by that?
Yeah. She made it clear, this is not just about the speech. It's about artists having control over their words and institutions deciding what kinds of political speech is acceptable. So, in her letter to the organization, she said, this is an act of censorship. And it further confirms that Canada's film and television industry has a problem with recognizing the dignity and humanity of Palestinians and acknowledging the ongoing genocide of the Palestinian people. So she's framing it as a broader pattern where artists, especially those speaking about Palestine, are feeling pressure within the industry to avoid certain political positions.
One of the consequences of this story has been that the former president of the Toronto Film Critics Association, Joanna Schneller, resigned after Elle-Máijá returned that award. What do we know about that? Why did she do that, and what did she say to explain her decision?
Right. So she, Johanna released a statement saying she's saddened to learn Elle-Máijá is returning the award, and that the decision to edit her speech was ultimately hers as president of the organization. So she said she's resigning in light of this outcome, but she didn't really get into further specifics about exactly why she's stepping down. What she did say is Elle-Máijá's speech, along with those of other recipients, was shortened to maintain the timing of the award show. But several people I've spoken to in Toronto's film community aren't really buying that explanation. I've been to these award shows myself. The timing of the acceptance speeches has never really been an issue. They've run at varying lengths, and if you're in that room, everyone's hobnobbing, drinking their cocktails, having a good time. No one's watching the clock. It's not like a ceremony that's broadcast on TV with a fixed time slot that they have to wrap up by, so that people can watch Hudson and Rex after or whatever, right? So
yes.
So a lot of people feel that justification for aggressively shortening the speech because the time pressure feels kind of weak.
I will say that one of the things that Elle-Máijá sort of mentions in her speech is that if you were delivering a speech in the room, you didn't have a clock on you. It wasn't you have to stop speaking after 1 minute. People were just sort of available, were able to sort of talk. Look, the numbers are in flux, but we know of 20 people who were TFCA members who have resigned out of the original about 50 or so. I think it's important for our audience to know that actually many of our contributors to this show are among the people who have resigned. So we're talking about Rad Simon Pillay, Rachel Ho, Barry Hertz, Sarah Tai Black, Black, Kathleen Newman-Burmang. Those are people who are regulars on Commotion. They've all resigned their memberships. Have you spoken to any of them? And what do they tell you about their decision to resign? Like, what do we know about why they're resigning?
I have indeed spoken to some of them. For a lot of them, it just comes down to trust and principle. They feel editing Elle-Máijá's speech is really across the line, and a lot of them are just calling it censorship.
Hmm.
So some have pointed out the hypocrisy that the ceremony started with this land acknowledgement, and then they went on to minimize like the sole acceptance speech from an Indigenous artist. But beyond that, a lot of people are seeing this situation as part of this worrying larger pattern of censorship at film award shows and festivals. We saw at the BAFTAs last month, filmmaker Akinola Davies Jr. ended his speech by saying "Free Palestine." That part of the speech was edited out of the broadcast. And then at this year's Berlinale Festival, which many consider one of the most political film festivals, jury president Wim Wenders kicked things off by saying filmmakers must stay out of politics, that they have to be the opposite of political. That raised a lot of concerns that this festival is essentially being defanged and pivoting away from political issues, which has been its calling card for many years, right? So for a lot of the people that have stepped down from the TFCA, they're saying this incident isn't isolated. They're saying it's a wider pattern of institutions kind of shying away from political speech, stifling people, artists who want to speak about global issues, especially Palestine, and they want no part of it.
A headline in The Hollywood Reporter reads, Toronto Film Critics Association faces collapse. Since then, the TFCA has released a statement. They've addressed these resignations. What do we know about how the organization plans to move forward, Alex?
Well, Elamin, I got a little bit of breaking news for you.
Okay.
Yeah. So the TFCA's acting president, Pat Mullen, he just issued a statement to the CBC saying the association plans to move forward, and he's emphasizing its members unanimously embrace freedom of speech. He says they've issued a full apology to Elle-Máijá for editing her speech without her knowledge and for not communicating time constraints. He says going forward, award winners will have the opportunity to review and approve pre-recorded speeches before they run, and any time constraints will be communicated with them throughout the process. And so on top of that, he's saying, they're trying to mend bridges now. They're reaching out to the people who've stepped down to better understand their concerns, and he says they're creating what he calls a member-forward group. So he's welcoming them back and inviting new voices that can represent Toronto's film scene. So we'll have to see. We'll have to see if they can superglue this thing back together, right?
I appreciate the breaking news on air, but also particularly appreciate that analogy, the idea of like trying to super glue this thing back together, because when you have nearly half of your members leaving in a week, that's a crisis. That's a crisis in every kind of way. And I guess
not a good look.
Maybe it's a good reminder to sort of say that like in the middle of this entire disarray, there might be folks who are listening to this who go like, this sounds like really inside baseball stuff. And maybe if I can just zoom out for just a moment, Alex. Toronto is host to the largest film festival in the country. It's one of the biggest in the world. What does it mean when an organization like this one, like the Toronto Film Critics Association, is in disarray like this? What are the consequences of something like that?
Well, look, Toronto, if I do say so myself, it's one of the most important film cities in the world. That's largely because of the Toronto International Film Festival, but also, the ecosystem around that festival. And the Toronto Film Critics Association is a part of that ecosystem. So when an organization like that is in shambles, it creates instability among one of the few groups that are helping to amplify Canadian films. Yeah. This organization champions a lot of homegrown films that maybe don't have huge marketing budgets or a big promotional machine behind them and might otherwise be overlooked. And this year, some good examples, they gave the J. Scott Emerging Artist Award to Chinese-Canadian filmmaker Xiu Danhe for her wonderful romantic drama Montreal My Beautiful. And then BC filmmaker Sophie Romvari, she got the $50,000 prize for Best Canadian Film for her drama Blue Heron.
Yeah.
So like that kind of money and attention can go a long way to launch an artist's career. Like we've seen it before with the TFCA, where they've helped filmmakers like Xavier Dolan, Denis Villeneuve, Sarah Polley, Matt
All of whom are
Johnson.
gigantic international names at this point. Yeah.
Yeah, they're massive. They're massive, and you know, Matt Johnson, the Toronto filmmaker, he was named. He was given the Emerging Artist Award early in his career, and then a couple of years ago, he won Best Canadian Film for Blackberry. And you know, look at him now, like that. His movie Nirvana, the band, the show, the movie is killing it at the
It
box
just broke
office.
some records. Yeah.
Just broke some records, and it's just across North America too. So even outside of our borders. But you know, like beyond that, like I want to make this point. You know, like last week, you had this episode where you talked about how Canadian movies are kind of tanking at the box office, right?
Yeah.
They're down 41% last year. And you know, I interviewed Cineplex's CEO Ellis Jacob a few weeks ago. I asked him about it. He suggested the issue comes down to the quality of the films themselves, which you know it upset a lot of people in the industry that I heard from.
Yeah.
You know, it grinded a lot of gears, and it's because many would argue that we're actually making incredible films in this country, and you know, the big issue is awareness. These films don't have huge marketing budgets that Hollywood does, so people don't hear about them. So that's where groups like the TFCA come in, right? They can amplify these movies that aren't getting their shine otherwise, and getting people talking about them. Because you know, if we don't big up our own culture, like who will, right? So, yeah. I guess that's part of the concern if an organization like the TFCA were to disappear. But at the same time, you know, like this crisis they're in, I feel like it's a reminder that supporting artists means allowing them to speak freely, right? Like, you know, these institutions have an important role to elevate these artists, but they have to create space for them to express themselves, even if what they say might be political or uncomfortable to some.
Well, I mean, and for all those reasons, for like the idea, like these are the stakes of the story. It's not a story that we're going to stop following. It's a really significant thing. I think you just laid out the stakes really perfectly. In the meantime, we'll let you go here. But Alex, I really appreciate your time, man. Thanks for coming on the show today.
Thanks, Elamin. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, of course. Good to see you. Alex Nino-Gitju is a reporter with the Canadian Press. You can find the full statement from the Toronto Film Critics Association in our podcast show notes.